Welcome once again. It's Ethan Mussolini, the Merchant of Success. And today we today we are focusing on the subject of how do you deal with a difficult boss? And this is a topic that typically pops up amongst my clients. These topics, they didn't just pop out of the blue. These are subjects that over the years I've noticed pop up either in groups, whether I'm training or coaching, especially one-on-one coaching or group coaching. I also have group coaching programs and masterminds. So these are topics and subjects that pop up. So when something pops up, I create a program around it. And this is definitely one of the most common. So how do you deal with a difficult boss? That's what we are focusing on today. Now, the key thing to note is when we talk about dealing with a difficult boss, whether or whichever other subject, I follow a 5-part framework. That's we look at the clarity, what is the subject matter and why is it important? We look at the mindset required. We explore the strategies to make that happen. We look at the skill sets to deliver on that. And of course, finally, mastery. How do you bring that to life? Okay, so let's continue. Number one, with clarity, let's look at these difficult bosses, so to speak. So usually when people talk about a difficult boss, they mean someone busy. Sometimes they mean a chaotic leader, meaning there's no order around them. And sometimes they mean the nosy micromanager type. They want to know each and every part of who that boss, every part and piece of you, okay? They don't give you space. The bipolar kind, okay? The narcissistic kind. And, these are the kinds who just are happy when you're suffering, typically, okay? And when you're happy, they are not happy. All right? Now, so let's talk about some statistics about bad managers or challenging bosses. Now, that 3 out of 4 employees report their boss is the worst and most stressful part of their job. So meaning for those who think that their job is challenging, usually you find that 3 out of 4 employees state that the boss is the worst or most stressful part of their job. If you see someone stressed out, usually 3 out of 4 times there is, a pointer heading towards their boss or the leader in this case. Employees who have managers they didn't like were 60% more likely to suffer a heart attack. Yeah, that's a big statistic, okay? Because then when you have someone, it's like someone hanging over your head, okay? So that's the challenge. Also, 65% of employees say they would take a new boss over a pay rise, okay? What I mean by that, if someone is working with a very challenging or difficult boss, 65% of employees said, I would rather have a new boss than a pay rise. Okay, that's how crucial or important people attach the quality of the boss. 51% of managers are disengaged with their job. An additional 14% are actively disengaged. Okay, so that's also something for us to be fully aware of, the level of disengagement. Now, why is this topic important for you to learn or master how to manage a difficult boss? Why is it crucial or why is it important? There are a couple of reasons why this is important. Okay, so let's explore those reasons why. Number one, You don't have control over who your next boss is going to be. So you might as well figure out or master the art of dealing with that person. Unless you're the hiring authority. Of course, if you're a hiring authority, then most likely that's not your boss. So since you don't have control over that, then you might as well master or learn or explore how to manage that. The other thing to note is that you spend most of your adult life with your workplace leaders, supervisors, or managers. Have you, I'm sure if I was to ask most of us, apart from now that we are working from home, you would realize that you typically spend more time at work than at home. And when I say at home, when we subtract the time for sleeping, I'm talking about your waking hours during working days is spent with your boss, with people at your workplace. Now, I will also tell you that right now, even when you're working from home, depending on when you're watching this recording, is you'll realize you might be at home physically, but when your heart, your mind, your soul, your spirit is at work. Because an email might be sent through, or a phone call comes through, or a WhatsApp, or a text message, or you're working on a project. So even when you're at home, somehow you're dealing with your supervisor, you're dealing with your boss, in quotes. So that's it. So you have to be aware of those realities. Also, we need to remind ourselves that you're not responsible for your boss's character, but you're responsible for how you respond. And that's going to be a theme, a core theme or a core strategy we are going to focus on how to deal with difficult bosses, because you have zero control on their character. You just have to find ways to deal with them. I told you that I have some clients I work with privately. I have someone who is based in South Africa, and we were having a session, and the boss is quite a pain in her neck, so to speak. And we had to explore strategies and ways and means on how she can best respond. Okay, she cannot fire her boss. She cannot change her boss. And we are talking about, this is a global organization this client works with. So you have to find a way, okay? You have to find some strategies somehow, because you're not responsible. At least you cannot control. You can only influence, but you can definitely not control. And and I'll be sharing with you some more things I was sharing with that client of mine. Not knowing how to deal with a bad boss character can break you down quickly. Yeah, I've seen that happen. I've seen people break down. I've seen people resign their jobs because of a bad boss. Therefore, it means not only is it crucial for your health, for your mindset, for your soul, for your spirit, it's crucial in a sense that it can determine the trajectory of your future if you do not figure out how to manage these difficult bosses. All right. All right. So let's look at the mindsets required to deal with a difficult boss. Number one is the mindset of I work with the boss rather than working against them. See, the key thing is you need to perceive your boss as an ally. And when you perceive your boss as an ally, this dramatically reduces the friction. Because remember, the mindset, the energy, the perspective you bring will impact or affect the dynamics. And those of you who are securing, I know some of us are securing the recordings, if you revisit the interpersonal relationships, the interpersonal intelligence and all that, I shared the story between Ethan and Stacy to give you an idea. Even though she wasn't my boss, the concept is the same. The second mindset, which is useful, is which I hinted on earlier, is I am responsible for how I respond. Okay. How you perceive your boss and their behavior should totally be in your control. Okay. your perception and your behavior. I was watching a video earlier today, and this guy, was speaking something I totally believe in. Say, you know what? How people behave, that's their business. But how I respond is my business. Okay, that's not how he framed it. I'm just paraphrasing. So how you perceive and respond is your business. Absolutely. So you just have to have that mindset and say, you know what? Not even I'm responsible. You say, I am 100% responsible. 100% responsible. So I know what I'm going to say is going to, it's a bit edgy, but that's the image which has popped up. So I'll take it as guidance from God that I'm supposed to talk about it. So there was this other gentleman, he was going to, I'm a soccer fan, some of you may have noticed by now. So I'm a soccer fan, and this guy was going to take a corner kick. So he placed the ball. He was someone of color, a darker complexion, and someone threw a banana, in front of him. And I don't need to explain what that means, but you know what this guy did? He picked the banana, peeled it, ate it, just rubbed his hands, took a corner kick and moved on. It's like you've thrown a banana at me to communicate whatever you want to communicate. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the banana. Sugar for me, glucose for me, more energy for me before I take a corner kick. Boom. I've never forgotten that image. You see, someone else could have been flabbergasted or hurt or disrupted or disappointed or angry, or all those are options. All those are options. This guy chose a certain response, which was throwing a banana at me. Thank you. Let me bite it. I was like, yeah, you're my hero, man. Good job. So you and I need to remind ourselves of that. Now, do I sometimes get disrupted over how people treat me or respond? Yeah, a few times. I would say 0.5 or 1% of the time, sometimes, if it's extreme. And I will tell you that I always remind myself that I am responsible, ultimately. The other mindset, which I found very useful, is doing my very best mindset. See, that the best reward should be the satisfaction derived from achieving your work objectives and or exceeding expectations. So meaning that should be your mantra. Say, I'm just going to do my very best. Now, I'm just giving you a heads up, since you're attending live, that the subject for my next column coming out next week is tuning out the noise. And I was saying noise could be anything. Doubts from yourself, doubts from others, challenges from other people or from the environment. And you see, being angry with your boss, a difficult boss could be part of the noise coming your way. And you have to make a choice and say, no, I'm going to focus on my work. And I'm just going to do my very best, regardless, because that's what I'm hired to do. I'm not hired to be distracted by the boss. I'm hired to do the best job possible, regardless. Okay. Now, please note that what I'm saying does not take away the idea that indeed there are some people who are extremely challenging to work with, because I've counseled some people, I've coached and counseled some people, and you hear stories like, what? All I'm saying is I'm giving you mindsets which would be helpful, which I found to be very useful in such circumstances for you to consider engaging with, depending on your context. Also, the other mindset which is useful is to ask, what are the key lessons from this? So meaning you look at dealing with a difficult boss as a learning process. Okay. That's very key. The other one is to remind yourself that this is not about me, it's about them. Usually you'll find that this is crucial. in terms of how you think about these situations. Yesterday, I was sharing with the Succeeding Daily Mastermind members that, oh, yeah, was it yesterday or the other day? So anyway, one of the groups, and I was telling them, look, I was saying, yeah, Succeeding Daily Mastermind members, yeah, yesterday. So I was telling them that sometimes how people behave is not about you, it's about them, what's going on in their world, how they perceive the world. And once you start to get that, then sometimes instead of being angry at these difficult bosses, then you become empathetic and say, you know what, this fellow is going through tough times. I'll give you an example. There's a certain head of an organization I was working with. I had just finished some work and we had some mini spat in front of the audience. And this person held a certain view, I held a certain view. And let's just say that the conversation was slightly intense. And then later we were chatting, we were talking. And then I discovered that this person, the conditions and circumstances that led that particular head of the institution to be in that position were actually painful. That person left a juicier job to be in this other institution for better conditions, and it ended up not being wonderful. So in essence, I was talking to someone who was carrying pain from the past to the present. And that's part of what I was dealing with. So you have to, sometimes it's just about the other party. And also when I say, what are the key lessons from this? I also believe that there's a spiritual dimension to this, what at the end of all this. The spiritual dimension is, sometimes I strongly believe that there are people God brings our way because they are supposed to be teaching us something. And typically, if you do not learn or master how to deal with such a character, God will bring that same character somewhere, wherever you go, until you learn or master that art. I recently learned the idea of soul curriculum, in that there is a curriculum, part of the curriculum you're supposed to have here on planet Earth, in that there are some things that we go through, just the same way you go through classes. You go through a certain curriculum and then you advance to another curriculum. Therefore, there are some people who have a curriculum for us. Say, you know what? Hey, here, how do you deal with the nastiness? Now, if you pass the test, then that person more or less disappears or disappear. If you don't, you repeat the class. You repeat the class by finding that person wherever you've run to. So again, I'm not saying that that's always the case. I'm saying you just need to be aware and know that sometimes certain characters come into our lives to teach us something or to prepare us for something. And that's huge. Once you get what I've just said, that to me, I believe is a spiritual truth. And therefore, if you do not pay attention and take on the lessons and become a better person to manage or deal with this individual, I can guarantee you'll go somewhere else, you'll find that difficult boss again with different clothes, different organization, same behaviors. And then you'll be like, how on earth do I keep attracting these kinds of bosses? All right. So, onto strategies now. Here are some 5 strategies for dealing with a difficult boss, which would be useful for you to consider. Number 1 is positive reframing. Okay. Now, this strategy is used when giving feedback or airing concerns. Dwelling on what needs to be done differently is an indirect way of educating a leader. Okay. What do I mean by that? So when you're dealing with a difficult boss, there are also moments where you may have to give feedback to that boss. In fact, that's something I recommend, that you find a way to communicate. your thoughts. Now, what do I mean? Let's just suppose someone or this boss is shouting at you. So what I recommend is, rather than say, stop shouting, you're still restating what is. A positive reframe is, moving forward or in future, if you really talk to me in a lower tone, I would still get to the point. And I find that when you speak to me in a lower tone, then I'm able to understand, compared to this kind of tone where I get jittery and worried. So moving forward, I would really appreciate it if you lowered your tone. Then it would make me even more productive, and I would deliver the outcomes even quicker and faster. That's positive reframing. So you're looking at what is not, and you're creating or framing what you would want to see in a positive frame. So meaning you shift from what is not to what you want to see. The second strategy is trigger identification and management. So what you need to pay attention to is to ask yourself, what triggers certain reactions from the boss? Are the triggers justified? And can you arrest the trigger ahead of time? Right. Now, let me give you an example. I used to have a bad habit. Again, here, not to boss, and I'm just referring it to home here. I used to have a bad habit of using those things that we use for the ears. Are they ear cobs? Not ear cobs. Someone can type it in the chat box. Somehow the language has flown from me, and yeah, I believe someone has typed it. Those, are they ear swabs? Are they swabs? Are they, what's the word? Earbuds, yeah, earbuds? No, cotton swabs, yeah, cotton swabs, thank you, yeah, that's what it is, thank you, Samantha, cotton swabs. Yeah, so I would use cotton swabs and then somehow would leave them either in the sink, near the sink, or just near where, yeah, usually near the sink. And it really used to bother my wife, and rightly so, because that was unhygienic. It was unprofessional and unfriendly, not friendly at all. So I got to know that it's her trigger. So I had to say, okay, this triggers her. Therefore, it got me to be super sensitive. Whenever I would start working on my ears, I would be thinking quickly how I'm going to have to throw them away in the bin. Okay, so meaning her trigger reminded me, or I used her trigger to remind me that I need to pay extra attention whenever I'm working on my ears. Now, how does that relate to the workplace? So you might discover that indeed there are certain triggers, and you start asking yourself, is there a way I can sort that one out ahead of time? Which then brings in something related to the third point of what motivates the behavior. Why is your boss mad because of a delayed deliverable? Okay, so now let's just suppose, let's first go back here so that I link it number 2 to number 3. So for example, you might find that your boss really becomes a totally different animal when you delay. Meaning when you delay on deliverables, then they become a totally different animal. Okay. Therefore, the next question, so then you have to be super aware that, you know what, I need to deliver things on time. And then you also need to ask yourself, what's the motivation? What motivates this behavior? Why is my boss mad because of a delayed deliverable? You could say, you know what, if I delay this, it delays the payments. It also ruins organizational reputation. So once you appreciate the motivation behind someone shouting or being mad at you over a delayed deliverable, so then it helps you to reframe the situation, not in the frame of this is really a mark of a bad boss, but rather a reminder of the value of you delivering things on time. Because sometimes we also trigger our bosses the wrong way over things which could have otherwise been avoided. So it's not always the other side that it's the bad boss. Sometimes it's also the bad, in quotes, employee or partner or associate, whatever you want to call it. So let's remember that also. Then number 4 is the HR route. The HR role. Let's talk about the HR route. This strategy works when the company organization has systems in place and it involves a third party. It could be higher authority or your HR manager. So there are those moments whereby you could engage all these things, you could do all the right things, you give this person feedback, the positive reframing I've mentioned, and still doesn't work. So you could engage your HR or the HR manager or a higher authority that you believe would be useful. And that means telling them, look, this is what's going on, and this is what I've done so far, and this is not working out. What do you advise me to do? Or how can you be of help? Or how can you be of support? So that's very important also for you to consider as a strategy. I would also like to propose that that shouldn't be your immediate strategy. That should be when you have done the other parts, because I believe in you taking 100% responsibility. Because if every time a boss shouts at you or misbehaves and then you're running to the HR or the higher authority, then you're also not playing your part. Because it could also be that indeed you're the one triggering all this, or it could be that this person also needs some feedback and they don't know. Because I will tell you, some people behave the way they are behaving and they don't know that how they are behaving is bad, because that's how they grew up. That's how they were brought up. I recall there's an organization we were consulting with many years ago, possibly about 8 or 9 years ago. And there is a certain exercise we give to get people to reveal their background. And there was this other head of the institution who used to shout and command, and people were, they were being driven nuts over this. Then when it came to them revealing their backgrounds, they realized that this person was actually a platoon commander. He was in the army and a commander at that. So they felt, so for him, that was a normal way of behavior. It was okay to command. So when they realized that, they're like, oh, wow. Now, it could be indeed that unless someone gave that fellow feedback, then for him, that was a normal way of behavior, because the institution he was working with, in this case, the army, and by the way, this was for a different country, this was in Tanzania. For him, that was business as usual, while for the employees in this particular institution, it was unmanageable. So some people, depending on their background also, unless you give them feedback, then they won't be aware. Because I'll tell you, there's another institution that I know. So this fellow used to be in the category of difficult boss, shouting and all that, until someone was courageous enough to give them feedback, and good enough, this person was a good human being. Say, oh, wow, I'm sorry, I really didn't know that I was like that. And from then on, it was a 360-degree change. So sometimes people stay in that frame of being difficult in quotes because there isn't someone courageous enough, candid enough to go forth and give them feedback. Of course, it's not also that every time you give someone feedback, they will change, some don't. But either way, at least you need to do your part. And then the fifth strategy, which is useful, is for you to set clear personal boundaries. Now, here is what I mean. No amount of money is worth your life. There's so much you can do in some cases. Know when to toughen up, wise up, or give up. What do I mean by that? So whatever I'm saying here, there are also those times where you feel you may do everything humanly possible and still things don't work out. And then there are also those times when you have to move on. Even though I said, okay, you need to learn and all this, there are those moments where you feel, you know what, you're done with your journey, you're done with your season, and it's time to move on. So, and I'm saying that should be the last resort. So the way they are arranged, the HR route should be the second last, and you moving on should be the final piece. But please do only do that if you've done all the other areas, okay? Because just running away is not the solution, okay? It's just, you should only move when you feel you've explored all avenues possible and you feel you cannot take it anymore, all right? Cool. All right, let's go to the skill set on dealing with difficult bosses. 6 steps that you can use while dealing with a difficult boss. Step 1, do your work well, have your facts right. In other words, do not give that so-called difficult boss an entry point, an excuse, an opportunity for you to be a target. Because the truth is, sometimes people make themselves targets based on how they are behaving. So just the same way I would sometimes how I would forget the cotton swabs, I was making myself a target for unnecessary attention. Not that she was, communicating in very harsh terms or the like. All I'm saying is, yeah, why should I make her life uncomfortable, unpleasant? Okay. It was I should have been, of course, now I no longer do that. Okay, that's the good news. That's the good news. All right. The other key is find out if there is more you could do or execute differently. What do I mean? Let me tell you what I mean. What I mean by that is you could go to that boss and ask them, I notice this has been happening or you've been shouting, whatever. Let's just continue with the line of shouting and say, is there something else I need to do or to start doing or do differently that would make our relationship better? Because I notice that sometimes it can be rather intense. Or is there something else I need to stop doing or start doing that would facilitate or enable you that will make it much easier for you to speak to me in a lower tone? See how I'm framing it? And of course, the tone you use is very crucial. If you go there, by the way, can you please tell me what I need to start doing or to start doing differently or to stop doing to make sure that you stop shouting at me? Now, you're also in the same boat now. You also need help, my friend. So it should be a tone where you're seeking advice, not seeking advice, but seeking feedback to make sure that you can be and do things better next time to make it easier, so to speak. So it's very, very crucial for you how you frame these things when you're communicating. Okay. Get that feedback. And when you get that feedback, then you run a self-development program for yourself. So you will know. They might tell you that, you see, you are not productive enough. Therefore, then you need to figure out ways and means on how you can be super productive. Or it could be that your CEO feels that you're not motivating your team better, or you're not managing the team better, and it's frustrating him or her. Therefore, the self-development program is you pursuing a leadership program. Or it could be that, for example, what frustrates your boss or makes them angry based on the feedback they are giving you is that you do not know how to communicate better. Then you can reach out to Ethan to help you with that, right? So depending on the feedback they have given you, take it seriously and take it as your curriculum, okay? Meaning the challenge becomes your subject of attention. The issue, the weakness becomes part of your curriculum, okay? So when you do it that way, then now you're focusing that on development. You're using the information your boss is giving you as a tool, as a reminder, as a resource, as a gift for you to work on yourself, right? Then step 4 is stay calm, professional, and respectful. I will tell you that if someone is shouting and you're also shouting, then it's going to be fire. If someone abuses you and you also abuses them and you also abuse them back, it's going to be a fight. So your job, first of all, is to stay calm. When I say calm, one of the techniques you can use to stay calm is before you shout or before you respond, not shout, before you respond back, let's just assume someone is engaging you and you're really feeling so super agitated. There are a couple of things you can do. One is focus on your breathing, and you just focus on how your tummy is breathing in, how your tummy is rising and falling as you're breathing in and out, because then that helps you to calm down. That's one. Two, the other technique I came across some time back is this lady recommends, before you speak back, first count in your brain. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Now, what that does is it gives you the space to at least think before you respond. Now, when I say 1, 2, 3, of course, I mean you do it mentally. You don't verbalize it in front of your boss. Say, okay, let me first count for you. 1, 2. Hey, he or she might slap you. Saying, do you think I'm just a beginner in class? Okay. Now, joking aside, here is the key. You see, why you need that space between thinking and responding is there are people who something happens and then they are reactive. They react there and then they're like, hey, but after thinking about it, I was like, why did I do that? I could have done it differently, because after some reflection, I was like, that was a mistake from my part. Even if he did this, I shouldn't have done that. The challenge, my friend, is in that moment, you are thinking after responding. It should be the other way around. You think and then you respond. The other thing that I've found very useful for me, I don't typically have a boss in typical manner for now, for the last so many years. So it's these moments where when I'm not happy or something like that, the character, the person I mainly deal with is my wife. And what I've found very useful for me is if I am not feeling fully in a good state, mentally and emotionally, I usually defer it. When I say defer it, I might give it an hour, I might give it 24 hours. So that when I'm communicating, my space or what I think or feel is I'm in a very calm state. So there could be moments when at least I'm just sharing with you my personal strategy. Personally, if I feel I'm super agitated, or which is extremely rare, by the way, if I'm unhappy or annoyed or whatever you want to call it, again, which is super rare, I always consciously give myself space first, meaning calm down, take a walk, go for a run, whatever it is, or defer it for a couple of minutes or an hour so that I reflect on how to communicate what I'm going to communicate. And of course, as a rule of thumb, professionalism and respect is a rule of thumb. You want to, because ultimately you don't want to say or do things that you're going to regret down the road. So even when you're giving feedback, because you want to think through your words, you want to think through your tone, you want to think through the context or the environment. For example, you don't start doing these sorts of things in front of everyone. Then if your boss has an ego, that could be another matter. So what I find, if you have some challenging feedback to give your boss, for example, it's better to request for time, one-on-one conversations. Say, okay, there's something I really would like to discuss with you, and it would just take 10 to 15 minutes. When is a good time for me to discuss this with you personally? Okay. Then your boss will create the time, the space, then to receive that feedback, to communicate one-on-one. So as a rule of thumb, it's always good to talk about these things one-on-one. And I know we'll be talking about giving and receiving feedback for managers. So look out for that, all right? So the tone, the language, the behavior, because I mean, if you hold files and you bang them, then that's not being professional. Then next is build your career, work on your self-esteem and confidence. Now, this is very, very important, the self-esteem and confidence aspect. If your confidence and self-esteem is very high, then you'll find things that people say, or your boss, whatever it is, it will not bother you that much, or it may not even bother you at all. But if your confidence and self-esteem is this tiny, then even the smallest of things will make you blow up. You become angry, your eyes become red, then you cry, then you cause drama because you're taking everything personal. And sometimes there are people who just say things not meaning to hurt you, but then you take them personally. Sometimes people say things accidentally, or they lack self-awareness. And when they do that, then you might take it personal. I'll give you an example. There's someone who apparently lacked the kind of self-awareness and just revealed the health status of that person in the group, in an online group. It was a health condition, which is not very palatable, and just said, oh no, for you can't, since you're suffering from this. And you see, the person who said that actually genuinely did not want to hurt that individual. So if that other person's self-esteem is very low, then it might really, really bother them so deeply. And they might take it fully personal. And at least I'm aware of that entity or organization. This other person just lacked emotional intelligence and awareness. So all I'm saying is, unless your game, your self-esteem game is solid, then you have those moments in life. You have a moment where the so-called boss has not had a good day, had a bad night, had a fight with the wife, or had a quarrel with the daughter or son or teenage daughter, whatever it is, and it didn't go well. Or they're just going through their own personal issues, and they say things that are nasty. And I'm saying, if your self-esteem is solid, then you remind yourself, that's not a reflection of me. Or it's like, okay, cool, that is his issue. Well, that's his stress, okay? I'm not saying that you verbalize it. I'm saying those are some of the things you can tell yourself if your self-esteem is solid. But if it's not, then you take things personal. Then you say, can you imagine, me, I don't understand, I'm tired of this place. No, just work on you. Just work on you. Make yourself better. Appreciate yourself no matter what. Love yourself no matter what. Remind yourself how valuable no matter what. Unconditionally love and accept yourself no matter what. Next, ask for a moment to be listened to. This is very crucial because some characters or bosses, they are dominant characters in that for them, they want to be the only one speaking. And unless you ask for that moment to be listened to, then you may never get it. So my advice is you need to consciously, strategically request for that moment. Say, can I please have a moment to share with you what I think? And now you might even start to speak and then they shut you down. Those are some of the part of the feedback I've had from people. When they shout you down, now that's the time to also be firm. When I say firmness, firmness does not mean shouting. Firmness means you must have that solidity of spirit and steadiness in your eyes to look at the person and say, look, could you please allow me to finish what I had to say? Because I'm sure I always listen to you when you're speaking and you finish your point. Would you kindly give me the gift of your listening to me, please? I would really, really appreciate that. Notice I'm not abusing, but I'm steady, I'm firm, I'm not shouting, and notice the language I'm using. Would you kindly give me the gift of your listening to me? See, it's like I am requesting, but at the same time, I'm firm. I'm not fumbling. I'm looking at the person in the eyes. So the strategy I'm giving you there is usually difficult bosses are dominant characters. And dominant characters, they want to dominate the conversation. They want to be the only ones with the space. And unless you demand for that space, you influence that person to get that space, then you may never get it. So you have to demand for it and state and remind yourself that you have a right to be listened to. And again, notice you don't have to use the word right. So don't say, well, I have a right to be listened to. No, 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 no. Say, could you please allow me to finish my point, because I believe that way we'll have a healthier conversation. Notice I'm adding the word because. You need to justify, and notice that how it's inclusive. Again, these are techniques, these are subtle techniques that I'm sharing with you that I typically share with my high-end clients, and at the same time, I feel it's very crucial when you're dealing with these characters, okay? Cool. So with the mastery then, here's what we need to do. You need to create a lifelike scenario with a difficult boss and apply the 6 steps given before. So what you're going to do is, if you have a difficult boss, then use this as a frame to think through, say, okay, and then you might find you don't need all these steps. You might find you need 1, 2 or 3 things, 3 pieces. You may not need all the 6. If you don't have one yet, because I also know we have I believe we have at least a university student online, is you just imagine you have a difficult boss. You can use this. By the way, you can use this at home. You can use this with your friends. Do not take this as only applicable to workspaces. If it's a challenging human being, these are useful, powerful tips for you to use and engage with. So that's your task. And then but then when you're engaging these tools also, pay attention to the results, because there could be a tool that you may use and it works in some circumstances and it may not work. Also, whatever I teach you, please note, it may work in some situations and it may not work in other situations. Don't come and say, but I used this on this one and didn't work. Well, different strokes for different folks. You might find that one of the bosses, you need to use just 2 of the items, and another you need 4, and another one you need 1. So if you have a different mix, then it won't work. So just be aware of that also. And then pay attention to the results. See, what are you getting when you do this? Then it will be feedback to you to see what to do and what not to do. All right, let me first pause this. So I want you to pause this and then discuss and reflect this in your notebook. What did you find most useful in this presentation? And how are you going to implement the lessons moving forward in your life, career, business? Okay, so please go ahead. So this is, all right, Gilbert is asking a question. How do you get a shouting boss, or how do you get a shouting boss, especially if they are, meaning, I believe, how do you respond to a shouting boss or manage one, especially if they are from a different culture, nationality setting that promotes that kind of behavior? All right, so Gilbert, that's a very, very useful question. And in my work, I've interfaced or interacted with those multicultural settings. Now, regardless of someone's cultural background, there are certain principles that still apply if we look at this again. Number 1 is, I believe in giving feedback, because if someone keeps shouting, can look at them. Now, they might say, I don't care. For us, we shout. Say, look, yeah, and here we are respectful and we pay attention to people's tone. Okay. So you have to, if someone's cultural background is of that kind, or how they grew up then those are people you need to keep reinforcing your stand. That's 1. 2, usually if you find that that person, there's someone above that person, it also helps if another individual can add in a message or add on a message to that effect. Then number 3, I could also use a very powerful and influential technique, and that is, look at the person, say, out of curiosity, what is it that I need to do or to stop doing that would help you to speak to me in a lower tone? Okay. Because it's really driving me crazy. And I believe you would want me to work in a more calmer, more productive state. And if you really want me to speak, to commit, to produce, to be very productive, it means you have to speak to me in a calmer manner. So what do I need to do to support you or to help you speak to me in a quieter manner? Now, what are you doing there is very, I'm teaching you highly psychological stuff right there. Number one, it's like I'm seeking advice. Okay. Number two, I'm adding the component of how they are going to benefit if they talk to me in a calmer manner, because then I'll be more productive and they want more results. Okay. Then number three, of course, I'm keeping it calmer. I keep in a calm tone. You do not shout at the same time. Then number four, when you're talking to such a person, as a reminder, look at them in their eyes. You have to look firm, because such characters, again, they love territory. So you have to look firm. If you're looking down, oh, I'm wondering, what do I need to do? No, look at them in the eyes. No need to shout, firm. And then finally, consistency, constant reinforcement of what your stand is. Then finally, they will get to the point. Okay. And again, there are some characters, again, I'm not saying that this is something that you should use. There are those characters whereby if it is to the extreme, sometimes you may also say, you know what, you also want me to keep speaking to you like this? Is that what you would want? That is, you should go to that extent if it is extreme. And of course, if the context allows. If the other context could be that if you raise your voice, then you're fired. But the feedback part, you have every right so long as you frame it the way I'm giving you. And then, of course, we'll be talking about giving and receiving feedback. Just make sure you attend that session. Please let me know if I've answered your question. You can type in the... Justine is asking from today, is it okay to turn the lens and evaluate myself as a boss, or shall we have a session for self-reflection and review? Well, as a boss, we'll have a session on giving and receiving feedback for managers. So that one would be a good one for you to reflect as a boss. So that's excellent. And one of the ways to review yourself as a boss is ask your staff. So would you kindly give me feedback in terms of how I'm behaving? What do you like? What do you wish I could do differently? And then what you could do is you could ask people to, if they can't communicate to you directly, you could say, look, you can type it in, you can just type it out in case you even fear that I might see your handwriting, and type it out and print it out and slide it under my door, something like that, so that you receive that feedback. Brian is asking, how do I deal with a shouting manager who doesn't open feedback opportunities, doesn't want to learn from juniors? Yeah, so for me, Brian, it's really about you, again, goes back to what I said earlier. It goes back to you being firmer. And let me see if I can switch on this slide. It goes back to you being firmer and consistent and believing that you can give this person feedback. And the way you do that, again, is through constant reminders. You look at, it's also about how you frame things. Usually people are not open to feedback when we say, oh, I'm tired of you doing this. I don't like this. I don't like that. Instead, you are better off framing what you'd want to see happen and the advantages of that to the organization and to yourself and to them. Say, let me give you an example. Let's go back to shouting. It looks like shouting is the biggest deal here. And it's indeed common from my personal experience. Clients have coached and all that. So it's to say, look, I'm just curious. Would you want me to be productive? Say, yeah. Cool. And I'm also wondering and curious, if someone kept shouting at you, would you be super productive? Because they might shout you down and all that. Say, look, and that's my point. I'm inviting you in your quiet time to reflect and say, okay, would you want someone to be shouting at you the way you're shouting at me? And I also imagine, now this is where you go to the benefits. I also imagine you would want to get the most out of me. And I'm inviting you to consider, look at the words. This is where being tactical comes in. I'm inviting you to consider you communicating to me in a calmer manner, because then you'll get the most out of me. I'm inviting you to consider, all right? I'm not commanding, I'm not suggesting, I'm inviting them to consider. You see, those are two strategic words. An invitation is hard to say no to. Consideration is also hard to say no. I'm not saying do it, I'm saying consider. Now, sometimes people may resist, but over time, if you keep framing, you can keep using different angles, and then over time they can get to the point. And again, if you do the best that you can and still don't get what you want, sometimes it might mean you try your talents elsewhere. And like I've mentioned, though, having said that, first engage all these angles I've mentioned. Nathan is asking, how better does one manage a boss that prefers to appreciate in private but castigate, blame, or even punish in public, other than the reverse? That's a great question. Again, feedback. Say, look, by the way, you could even use me as an excuse. By the way, we were going through this program and we were advised that it's better to castigate or criticize in private, because then you keep someone's confidence and self-esteem intact. And if it's praise, you praise in public, because then it boosts someone's confidence and self-esteem. So that's something I would encourage you to consider, all right? So you can say you learned recently. Sharon, I've tried some of the strategies you've proposed, Ethan, and additionally set some boundaries to avoid further occurrences, but my boss keeps breaking the boundaries. How better do I cope with this beside departure? I really love my job. Wow, that's a biggie. Now, the other thing you could attempt, based on what I had taught some time back, is to engage the spiritual arm, the spiritual angle. Pray for this person. See them being the better versions of themselves. Because then some of these works that we do are more spiritual than logical. So pray for them, engage them. And when you say some of the strategies, that also tells me you've not engaged all the strategies. And sometimes also how you frame. So if you say some of the strategies, then engage whatever you feel has not been used before. And then pray for them, and then of course keep seeing, and this applies to all of us, by the way, to all people, keep noticing what is good or positive about these people, because also how you look at people, how you see them is going to affect how they treat you. And Sharon, if symptoms persist, please seek Ethan's advice. Nathan can give you my private phone numbers, and then you can reach out. Sometimes all you need is some coaching to give you some different perspective. Once I understand the deep context, then you may need some help. If you need extra support, let me know, especially given that you love your job. For me, that's a big positive. So then it means there should be a way to manage this person, and I've advised people that I need to know the deeper details. But for now, engage the spiritual arm, focus on what is good about this person, and use the other techniques, which strategies which you haven't used yet. Yeah, please, if I've responded to your question and if you have answered you, please let me know in the chat. Gilbert says, yes, you have answered. Thank you, Jojo. Spot on for the prayer. It has worked for me. Yeah, hooray. Thank you, Jojo, for confirming what I've said. Yeah, so spiritual. Most of these things are spiritual, by the way. Nathan says, thank you, helpful. Yeah, let me know if Brian says good. All right, great. So any other question? And Sharon, let me know if Sharon, I haven't gotten a response from you to see if I've answered your question or not. All right. Let me first pause there. This is brilliant from Dorcas Magoba. She says, also bosses are human. Sometimes they are dealing with challenges. And oftentimes that is the issue. That's why I said one of the strategies is to remind yourself that it's not about you, it's about them. Oh, and that's a good psychological move that you can do. Oh, wow. There you go. That, you know, here is someone saying that after I resigned, I discovered that my boss was going through a divorce. There you go. That's what confirms what I was telling you earlier, in that sometimes these fellows are going through stuff. And once you know that it's not about you, that it's about them, then you become more empathetic. You pray for them. Please write this one down. Hurting people hurt people. Hurting people hurt people. So one of the prayers we can say this way, God help whatever is causing this person to behave this way, I pray that you heal them with grace and love. You see how that changes the dynamic? Because usually sometimes people are going through their own stuff, or it's history, or typically that's what happens. So now when it is also just focused on me, then you lose focus of what could be going on. So part of our jobs, I like this, part of your job, whether manager or leader or employee, is this. Look at yourself as a spiritual warrior. Are you praying for your workplace? Are you praying for your bosses? Are you praying for your team? Are you praying for your colleagues? That there may be more love, that there may be more understanding, that there may be more productivity, that there may be more clarity, that there may be more harmony. So that when you enter that workspace, you're adding that spiritual energy, that spiritual dynamic, that spiritual dimension that heals the workspace. Because when we do, and another person does, and you also influence your colleagues to do the same, then the dynamic changes. That doesn't mean that we only drown ourselves in only prayer. There has to be practicality also. So you speak it, but also you do it. So thanks for sharing that perspective of you resigning only to discover that your boss was going through a divorce. So meaning you focused on you alone and you lost perspective of what was possibly going on. So let's pray for people who behave in certain ways. They are going through something, either consciously or unconsciously. Justine says, I found this session a very great link to the interpersonal intelligence module. So double revision for today. You're welcome, Justine, and I'm glad that you found it. Yeah, so all these things, they are building up. Whoever is disciplined to go through all these, trust me, you'll be amazed. Dorothy says, true, sometimes they are dealing with a lot and you are the punching bag in the moment. So to laugh, yeah, but that's what happens. Has it ever occurred to you that, say in families, if they, in marriage, they tell us that one of the best gifts you can give your children is to treat your partner better. That's one of the best gifts you can do. Because if you lash out, if you lash out at your wife, for example, then guess what? If the baby comes, mommy, what do you want? Go. But if you treat your wife and they are laughing, they are lovey-dovey, then when the child comes, man, you're like, oh, come on, sweetheart. Yeah. So, in other words, if you punch them, they look for how to forward that punch. They look for a forwarding mechanism, and then someone becomes the victim. Yeah, hurting people hurt people. Wow, true. Yeah, cool. Samantha, you should capture that and put my image and whatever those words and post them on social media. It would help. I was once a terrible boss. I was going through stuff. Looking back, I feel sorry for the people I worked with. Wow. You know what? You're my hero. What do I mean you're my hero? I appreciate your honesty. And I appreciate you driving home the point. I usually teach that if people knew better, they would do better. So you are going through stuff and you didn't know how to deal with that stuff. You didn't know. Not because you're a bad person, you just didn't know. You didn't have the right tools. That's why I was talking about running a personal development program for yourself. You didn't have the right tools. No one stretched their arm to you, or you didn't know how to turn. So for me, this is the most powerful comment I've received so far in all these sessions. Thank you so much for being candid enough. And you can pray for those people. And if you can call some of them, you can call them and say, I'm sorry. If you're able to reach out to them and say, you know what, I'm sorry I hurt you. It's because I was hurting, I was going through stuff. I didn't mean to hurt you. Yeah, it would be fine. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your candidness. That's powerful teaching right there. We can replicate the love and help them recover too. Eventually we win. Prayer works. Thank you. By the way, can we also start? Oh, here is my... Goretti says, be a spiritual farmer in addition to being a spiritual warrior. Thank you, Goretti. That's brilliant. So a warrior fights, a farmer plants. A farmer, you plant some seeds. Plant seeds of peace, seeds of love, seeds of joy, seeds of harmony. Thank you, Goretti. Dorothy, could even be failure to deal with a painful past causing us to behave the way we do? Absolutely, Dorothy. So meaning someone has had a lot of negative past, or they have gone through a lot of pain, and it is verbalized, it is demonstrated. So usually that's what goes on. See, that's why around peace in the world starts with peace in people's hearts. All this stuff you see going on around in the world in the wrong way, usually it starts with people not being able to deal with their stuff. Then they look for an external, to use your words, a punching bag. They look for a punching bag. Then they say something terrible. Then they think someone is worth to die. It's because someone is not at peace with themselves. If you're at peace with yourself, then all this stuff can be handled in a much, much better way. All right? Gilbert is asking, how do you deal with an insecure boss, for example, one who thinks you are after their position or might shine more than them? Gilbert, that's a heavy, heavy, heavy question, and you're absolutely spot on. I've heard of many characters, many people, raise that issue. Two things, there are two ways to look at it or to approach it. One is, once again, to pray for that person. But then number two is, as much as possible, you need to be very tactical with such characters. People with low confidence and self-esteem have to be very, very tactical and sensitive, because they are super sensitive. They take things personal. So number one is praise them as much as possible when they do good, not flattering. When they do good, appreciate them. That makes them feel good. If you do it in the open, it makes them feel even better. Okay. If you've learned something from them, thank them how they've learned from you, and also mentioning. So then that way they keep seeing you as someone that they are serving, that they are still superior to. Number two, with all due respect, if someone, and then number two, you could also ask whether you could also start strategizing whether you could go into a different department or something, because, or you might find that your talents would be better served elsewhere. Because I will tell you, if someone feels insecure around you, then it's going to be very difficult for you to, not difficult, it will be very challenging for you to grow. So I would either start seeking for ways, if I can be pushed to a different department over time, or seek for another opportunity elsewhere, Gilbert. I'm just being very upfront and honest with you. It's not, I know if your boss was here, they wouldn't feel fun to hear me say that, but that's the reality. So you need to grow, and you can't grow if someone feels that you're a threat. And by the way, for the rest of us, if you're a boss here or a leader, please never, ever, ever feel threatened by someone. Always, as much as possible, support other people to be a success. Support, when you help people to be successful, they help you to become more successful. You're hearing Team Ethan MUSOLINI here, I mean Team Success Africa here, and they will tell you, if I learn something, I want to share it with them, because if they are better, then I'm better. Then they're able to support me. And even if they don't stay with me forever, if they go somewhere, they become wonderful ambassadors. That's the mindset I was sharing some time back. So if you're a manager, please note that you're better off helping your people to be the best versions of themselves rather than otherwise. Cool. Gilbert says, practical answer, great.